I don't know how much you like surprises. You can hear me, John? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Positive reinforcement is always good. Some surprises we like and some we're not so keen about, like to surprise on your birthday or surprise some celebration of some kind. But there's other kinds of things that keep cropping up, especially if you've got kids. I don't know if you notice this, but they've got new surprises every single day. If you've ever tried taking a bunch of kids on a trip and you've planned it out to the finest detail, it never works out the way you plan it to be. So why bother? But one of my favorite stories about that sort of thing is the year when I was in grade 12 that the staff at good old Halliburton Highland Secondary School decided that the grade 12 should and could take a trip to New York City by bus from Halliburton. And some of you remember, or know, Dale Robinson. He was in charge of that trip. And Dale and Wells Robertson, so one was history, one was geography. And that's what we were going to study in New York, in New York City. And we raised funds all year. It was great fun. It was great camaraderie we had. And off we went. And I just know that we ended up staying in a hotel in downtown Manhattan and not a whole lot of supervision. So, oh dear. One of the stories was one of our gals, it was Marg Ackerblade, and she was one of the, more sturdy of the ladies, one of my classmates. Somebody tried to mug her, and anyway, it worked out bad for the other guy. I won't go into detail. So, but if you go on to something like that, you got to be prepared for whatever may come your way. It's kind of a go with the flow thing. You need to adapt. And that's the story of our lives in that kind of thing. I was involved with, as you probably remember, missions to Mexico, and before that to Venezuela with a bunch of teens a bunch of years ago. And on the way back from Mexico, we had to stop over in Atlanta. We're going to jump from Atlanta to Toronto. And they started bumping people onto other flights. And they bumped one of our teenage kids onto another flight all by himself. Surprise! I was freaked right out. I lost my cool, I got to say. But anyway, I had a conversation with some people, and they actually switched the guy up for our translator, who was an adult. So she took that seat on the other flight, and we all kept our kids together. But, it's the kind of thing you never know what's going to happen. Jesus was the master of go with the flow. Oh, my goodness. That's one of the fun things about reading the Gospels. If you read the Gospels, you think, what's going to happen next? Every day something shows up. And of course, he had his kids, in quotes, with him most of the time. As you go through the Gospels, pretty much all the time, he's got the kids with him, the disciples I'm referring to here. And every day there were surprises. Last week, where I went to church down in Port Colborne, and the lady there talked about the woman at the well. I mean, there was a weird day. This is John chapter 4. Jesus is left alone at this well, and he encounters a Samaritan woman, and they have this great, incredible conversation. And he really has to go with the flow because she keeps challenging him, and he has to come up with answers, and of course he does. It's a great chapter. So today is maybe the quintessent display of Jesus going with the flow. He has crossed the Sea of Galilee with the disciples in one of their boats, which means they're in Gentile country. So they're really out of their own land. And had Jesus' fame already spread to this area? Perhaps. And if it had, you can expect that the villagers or the town or the city or whatever it was there were excited. He was on his way, and they were anticipating maybe hearing good news, maybe getting healed, because Jesus did a lot of healings. Who knows what it was? We can only sort of surmise and guess. They probably didn't plan the welcoming committee that he got, which was a basically crazed, demon-possessed guy comes charging at him or something like this and yelling. How do you deal with that? And so Jesus has to adapt and deal with it. It says here, when Jesus stepped ashore, as soon as he got there, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. This man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but lived in the tombs. So he's naked. So that's a bit of a shock. And when he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice. That's always fun. What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me. It says, many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. This is a difficult situation. What's he going to do, right? The interesting thing about this demon-possessed, I'm going to go into, what that's all about. But it's interesting that this guy has knowledge, inside knowledge of who Jesus is. He says, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Right? So that's true. But then he says, I beg you, don't torture me. So it shows his ignorance of who Jesus was and what his mission is and what he's all about. Because he's not here to torture us. I came not to condemn the world, says Jesus, but to save it. He came into this world to deliver us and to love us and to bless us and to heal us. So he didn't get that. He was just afraid, or the demon was. So there's a lot of stuff going on here which is tricky and challenging for Bible scholars. So, for instance, he doesn't come out right. The demon does not go out right away. Every other place you find someone possessed in the Gospels, and Jesus, speaks to it and casts it. He just says he cast it out, and away they go. Not this time. So that's a little bit weird. What's going on? So that's a challenge for Jesus, because normally he would just say, out, be gone, leave him. But that doesn't happen. So he changes tacks. He adapts, and he says to him, what is your name? Now, there's no place else in the Bible that I can think of, and definitely no place in the Gospels where people get asked demons what their name is. That's weird. And he says, my name is Legion. Legion. Because many demons had gone into him. So, I forget what a legion is. Is it like 100 soldiers in a Roman cohort of soldiers? So, however, there's a bunch of demons. And they beg him repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. Don't send us into the abyss. Weirdly, so this is actually the only place in the Gospels where we have the word abyss. It's the word, in the Greek, it's the word abyssos, from which we get the word abyss. So it's got this Greek origin. The only other place it's in the New Testament, I believe, is in the book of Revelation, where it's found like 7 times. And it's often translated things like the bottomless pit, where the demons and Satan dwell and stuff like that. Apparently, they don't want to go there. They got a good thing going on here inside this crazy guy, a crazed guy, I should say. So there's a large herd of pigs feeding, and the demons beg Jesus to let them go, and he lets them. He gives them permission. Off they go, and when they go into the pigs, the herd rushes down the steep bank into the lake and is drowned. Even the pigs don't put up with this. It's such a strange story. And, there are questions about the economic repercussions. I mean, if you had a herd of pigs and they all ran down the hill and got drowned, that's the end of your herd of pigs, right? I don't know. Maybe you can still salvage the meat. It's like roadkill. I'm just making stuff up. So anyway, that happens. Basically, it's to me, I think it's presented to us to tell us something about the degree of the evil that was involved and the degree of the power of Jesus to deliver. So that's there. So then people come back from the town. They went to see what had happened. They found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. So he's completely delivered, completely recovered, completely whole because of Jesus. But it says they were afraid. They're not particularly afraid of this guy who breaks his chains and, screams at the top of his lungs all the time. But when Jesus delivers him, now they're afraid. That's interesting. And then it goes on, then all the people of the region asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So their response to this grand deliverance was fear. So how does he respond to that? And they say, they begged him to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So If you put yourself in Jesus' shoes for a minute, you went over there. When he went there, in his mind, I'm sure, he was thinking he would go and he would be a blessing. He would tell them good news. He would proclaim the gospel. He would probably touch people to heal them and maybe do some deliverances, whatever. And he would be welcomed because everywhere Jesus went, he was welcomed. But now they said, get out of town. What do you think he does? Well, he leaves, which I think is very telling. He just, okay, off he goes. Because Jesus does not go and does not stay where he's not wanted. And that's a very, I'd say, insightful thing to know about God, about Jesus. He never forces himself upon us. It's not his way. He's too humble. And I'll go back to my 1 Corinthians 13. Love does not insist on its own way. And God is love, and so he never insists on his own way. He tells us, here's my way, and it's up to us whether we want to take it or leave it. It's your choice, because he will not push it on you. He will not force it on you. He always leaves it to us to choose for ourselves. And if we say go, he goes. Interesting. I find that quite interesting. So, but he's got a new disciple here. And this disciple is actually, he's very dramatic, but he's characteristic of what it is to be a disciple of Jesus, because he's someone who has been delivered. And if you are Jesus' disciple, that means you are someone who has been delivered and you know it. That's why the cross is the central thing of the gospel of Christ, because it's about deliverance. It's about forgiveness for, the horror of the power of sin and the guilt of sins. And, Jesus came to deliver us from that and to make us whole again. So we may not have this such a dramatic thing as this guy, but if we've encountered Jesus and we know we need the cross and the blood of Christ and the forgiveness and grace of Christ, and we've experienced that deliverance, then we're in the same boat as this guy. And of course, he wanted to go with Jesus. He says, I want to come. Well, naturally, can you imagine being with Jesus 2,000 years ago when he's going around doing all those things? Walking on the water and, cleansing the lepers and raising the dead. Would you not want to go do that too? Jesus won't let him, which, okay. Partly probably because he's a Gentile and they're going back across to Jewish land and, that's not going to work. But anyway, and he just says to him, return home and tell how much God has done for you. So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him, which is what Karen's going to be doing. And hopefully all the rest of us. But, this is a typical day with Jesus. Adapting, seat of the pants, go with the flow. He was the chief of it. None of these days are boring. None of it is predictable. No two are the same. And to me, here's the difference between what I would call religion and following Jesus. Now, I don't want to knock, people. Some people are really, religion, that's horrible, or they think they like the word religion, and I'm religious because I'm Christian. But it tends to have a bit of a connotation of, you've got this set of rules and rituals and regulations and habits and things that you do, and that's what makes you a Christian or whatever. I'm not going to knock those things, really. I mean, there's studies and practices and things that are involved. I think in being a Christian, some are kind of prescribed or seem to be. And so we may get it confused and think that's what it is to be a Christian. We go to church and we do our offerings and we help with the poor perhaps or the hungry, and we read the Bible from time to time and we have a little prayer we say, and those things are good, but that's not the core of what it is to be a Christian. It's a life of going with the flow. It's a life of living in the Spirit. It's a life of adapting to whatever God allows to fall into our laps on a day-to-day basis, and listening to the Spirit of God to know how to respond and how to be in the moment, how to treat people. It's nice if we have a rule book and follow the instructions, and here's the 5 pillars of Islam or whatever, and this is what you do. And there's something attractive about that. It's very safe. You know what's right, what's wrong, and you just do it. But that is not really the Christian life. Now, I give you that you and I need routine in our lives. We need to know what to expect most times. I need to know that I'm going to go to bed at night and I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to have some meals, and, I'm going to walk the dogs and, brush my teeth, et cetera, et cetera. You and I will go crazy. We're not sane unless we have a certain amount of routine in our lives. But the Spirit of God is going to be full of surprises if you want to walk with Jesus. And so you need to learn to adapt and go with the flow. Jesus is a person who wants to engage our lives and be with us as we engage in other people's lives all the time. Okay? So this thing is personal and relational, not religious and ritual. Jesus is a person who wants to engage our lives and be with us as we engage in others' lives all the time. It's personal, ever-changing, dynamic, go with the flow. That's living in the Spirit. And it's actually quite an adventure. It's not that safe because, there isn't not necessarily, you can't know in advance what God's calling you to do often until right in the minute, right in the moment. How am I supposed to deal with this guy? What am I supposed to say to this person? What am I supposed to do with this challenge that I'm faced with? It's quite an adventure, really. So do you realize that? Probably, maybe, sort of. Maybe everybody realizes that, the Christian life. Yeah, we have routines. We come to church and we do certain set way we do our worship, and other churches have their set ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. We like the routines. But the real Christian life is walking with Jesus, personally relating with him, listening to him through his Spirit, and adapting to everything that comes our way day by day. And that's the adventure of it all. And that's what Jesus models for us as we go through the Gospels on a daily basis. It wasn't the same thing every day. It was different every day. And, I think the people around us, the non-Christians in our world, look at Christians and think that we're religious, think that that's what we're about, that we're people who do these ritualistic things, and we have our little ways and our little rules, and we just keep them, and that's why you were Christians, and that's how you be a Christian. Wrong. I would like to convey to them that they get to have a relationship with the Maker, which is why the Maker made us in the first place. He wants us for himself. He wants us to know, and Christ died for us so that we might be forgiven, and reconciled to God, so that we have a relationship and a friendship with the living God. Because that's what we're made for. And that's how we are at our best. Okay? And I wish we could convey that. It's life abundant. It's the best life. And it is the life that we're meant to live. Let's pray. Lord Jesus,